right, guys, let's break a story down that has never been clear. But it matters. Knowing how this happened matters. Ilia Topuria telegraphed. He laid the groundwork for months that he was going to 55. He called out Islam by name repeatedly. He did not call out any 45-pounders. He did not go to the media. He did not get something going with 45-pounders. We then get the information that Ilia went to the UFC and made it official. I am not going back to 145. I want to fight for the title at 155, of which the UFC did not commit to. They didn't love the idea that he was moving up. But they accepted his belt back at 45. They contested it almost instantly. Volkanovski, Lopez. Move on with your day. Islam doesn't accept Ilia Topuria's challenge. Now, nobody has really challenged Islam. Guys have worked their way to him or said, I want a title shot, but they don't really go after Islam. They don't call him out directly. There's not a lot of guys that look at his skill set and say, hey, I can counter that. There's just not. Islam's one of these guys that he doesn't get picked on. And Ilia broke that. And they went to Islam. They wanted his answer. And Islam said a lot of things, but yes was not one of them. And he talked about, well, I think Ilia should have to do something first. He talked about he's not ranked. He's talking about Charles is the guy. He talked about I had some business with Artem. And he made it clear that his own interest was at 170 pounds, but that he wanted to wait for the result of Belal versus Jack. So, this is the score. This is what happened. And it greatly matters if that is right. If Ilia Topuria, in fact, left 145 to fight Islam, and for whatever reason, Islam chose to do a different fight, that matters. And now, and one caveat that you must understand if you're following the story, Ariel Helwani has maintained that he has an absolute confirmation from a source that Ilia Topuria was promised a title fight if he went up to 155. Now, I have resisted that tooth and nail. I have resisted that just because that doesn't make sense. The UFC does not want guys leaving belts behind. They have never wanted guys walking away from belts. And you can tie that all the way back to a court case between Dana White and BJ Penn. It's one of those things. They don't want that. So if Ilia called and gave them this news that they don't want to receive, where in there would they then be making a guarantee to Ilia? And I couldn't get my head around that. And Ariel kept telling me, Chael, whether you understand it or not, that's what happened. And I kept saying, no, Ariel, that just doesn't make sense. And Ariel kept, Chael, I don't just say things. I say things when I know things. He was guaranteed a title shot. But you got to stay with me on this. Because Islam, okay, so now we have Usman Nurmagomedov. And if you don't know that name, please take the time to learn it. This guy is nasty. He's unbeaten. He may have the best record in MMA. I mean, he's like at 26-0. It's something just crazy. And he's a 55-pounder that was signed to Bellator, now PFL. But he also wasn't in a hurry to get to the UFC because his brother, his training partner, Islam, was the king of that division. So he's going to go take over this side of the world, and Islam's going to do his thing over here. But now that Islam is left, it opens up the door for Usman Nurmagomedov. And I just want to bring this point to you, fill you in on the name. Very nice guy. You'll like him a lot. But he came out and said, hey, listen, I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but Hunter Campbell flew to Dagestan to meet with Islam. And Hunter Campbell's idea was that Islam go to 170 and fight for the belt. Now, Islam liked that, but Islam did not want to relinquish his belt at 155. He wanted to pull double duty. He liked the idea of champ-champ. He liked the idea of not having to deal with that scale each time and focus a little more on the fighting. But he was going to continue to deal with that scale, whether he liked it or not. He was going to keep going back to 55. It was the UFC that said, no, we want you at 170. We think it's better for business at 170. Ilia is coming up. We don't have an interest in you versus Ilia. Ilia will have his division. Volker Lopez will take over the 45-pounders. We're going to get you on the top of the bill at 70. This is what Usman said, and he said enough to say, perhaps I shouldn't be saying this. But that changes this story colossally. And many people did wonder, why did they strip Islam? And they did not waste any time to do it. I mean, they stripped him. They gave him the title shot right away. They made that announcement, but they're running a fight next week for the very belt that Islam never lost and we're being told never wanted to relinquish. Now, it gets complicated. It really does. And as a guy who's cut weight and starved and done that suffering, I don't believe that if you're given a choice to cut weight and suffer for the same amount of money and the same opportunity, which is a world title, or not to, I just don't believe that you're going to choose to. And the only person we've ever seen do that back and forth is Amanda Nunes. So there is reasons why the UFC might go, hey, hold on. You're going to go and grow and get into 170 and you never really liked the weigh-in anyway. If we're going to move you there, let's just keep you there. There is reason. But is that what happened? It changes the story. From where I was sitting, and I'm only as good as the information that I'm following, but as I'm following it, and the timeline will back me up, Ilia moved to 155. 45 days before Islam moved to 170, and Ilia spent all 45 days trying to fight Islam. And it was to the point that Khabib even spoke about it. And Khabib said, hey, we've already fought the smaller guys, and we've taken all the risk, and we've given them all the opportunity. But the bottom line is Ilia is not ranked here. He's not even ranked. So give him whatever fight you want to get him whatever ranking you need to, but you got to give him a fight somewhere else. We don't want to just fight the 45-pounders that are moving up. Now, it's a perfectly logical thing to say. But now Usman is telling a different story and has a lot of support to that. And by the way, this is not a case of somebody lying. That's not at all what we have. Nobody's ever made it clear for us. Usman's the first one to even attempt to clear it up. But it does matter. And then you also have the question of, did Ilia know that? Because at the same time, right, this interview comes out, I read yesterday, from Usman. But I read another interview yesterday from Ilia. And Ilia was talking about the weight cut and the suffering and what it's like. And there's not enough money. You give him all the cars in the world. When he's at that point and he's hurting so bad trying to get to the scale at 145, he would trade all the money and whatever mythical cars you want to have a magic wand to give him to have a cup of water. And he said, it's like living in the desert. I want to live on the beach. Which was a very clear way of him saying, I don't want to go or be at a 45-pounder anymore. So was it Ilia's idea to move up? If it wasn't his idea to move up, and according to Ariel, he was guaranteed, if he moved up, he was guaranteed a title shot, of which I resisted because I just don't, right? You guys have heard me say this repeatedly. I don't know how you take a phone call that you don't want to have and then you start making promises. But perhaps that's not the way this went. Perhaps Usman has just shedded some light on this whole thing, and it does change the story. And that's not a huge story, by the way, and this is the one that's ranting and raving, but down the road, these two are probably going to find each other somewhere. And if we are building to an organic grudge between two guys, we've got to have our fact pattern down. And Usman's version does fill in a lot of gaps. It does fill in a lot of holes. It explains why Islam was stripped. It explains why a title fight at that weight class was made so quickly. It explains why the lack of interest of champ versus champ. But at the end, we don't know. All we could hope is that the media questions and ask the questions at a press conference. Because I am a historian, after all. I am somebody that people will come to not only now, but 10 years from now. And I do my best to tell the story the way the story happened. And I must admit, in this situation, how it happened and the order of events is a little bit unclear.